My name is Daniel. I'm 52 years old, and 6 months ago, I learned that blood doesn't make you family. It only makes you related. It's incredible how the money you place on someone's table can blind them to the point of biting the hand that feeds them. That night, while my brother filled his mouth with words of contempt and my mother let out a laugh that still echoes in my ears, I made a decision. I didn't shout, I didn't break anything. I simply looked at them and understood that my generosity had been their greatest insult. They called me a failure while I was paying the mortgage on that house, the insurance on their cars, and even the food they were chewing. But the faucet was turned off that very night. If you enjoy stories where betrayal has consequences and justice arrives without warning, make sure to like and subscribe. Here we share real stories of revenge and lessons you never forget. For more than 15 years, my life could be summed up in one word: provide. I didn't do it out of ego or a need for control. I did it because that's what I was taught a man was supposed to do. My father died young and left me in charge of a structure that was already falling apart. My younger brother, Ethan, was always the favorite. The artist, the dreamer, the one who couldn't be bothered with the rough edges of real work. My mother, on the other hand, made sure to feed that monster of arrogance, convincing him he was special, and that I was simply the engine that kept everything running. I built a logistics company from the ground up. Years of little sleep, eating in my truck between meetings, and handling problems that would have broken most men. But I made it. At 52, I hold a solid position. Still, I never showed off. My clothes are simple, my watch is practical, and my personal life is private. My mistake was letting them see my bank account as a bottomless well, but seeing me as dull and unremarkable. To them, I was the boring brother who only knew how to work, while Ethan was the life of the party, the man with potential who just never quite took off because, according to my mother, the world wasn't ready for his talent. I paid for everything. The house they lived in, a 4-bedroom property I put in my mother's name so she would feel secure. I covered the maintenance, the utilities, the property taxes, even the vacations they took. Ethan lived in the west wing of that house at 38 years old, without holding a job for more than 3 months at a time. His excuse was always the same: the boss didn't appreciate him or the work environment was toxic. I listened, nodded, and kept signing checks. I felt responsible for his well-being. I believed that if I succeeded, they should too. I didn't mind being the failure who worked 12-hour days if it meant my mother never had to struggle. The relationship was strange. They only called me when a bill arrived or when Ethan's car needed repairs. At family dinners I paid for at the best restaurants, he was always the center of attention. Ethan talked about his investment projects, cryptocurrency schemes, and business ideas that never materialized, while I stayed quiet. My mother looked at him with almost religious devotion, touching his hand and telling him how proud she was of his spark. To me, she offered a brief, "Thanks for dinner, Daniel," in the same tone you'd thank a waiter for doing his job. I accepted that role. I convinced myself that respect isn't demanded, it's earned, and that eventually they would understand the sacrifice behind every dollar that passed through their hands. I was wrong. The emotional status in that house followed an inverted hierarchy. The provider was second class, and the parasite was king. Ethan walked through that house with a superiority that would have been laughable, if not for the fact that his designer clothes were bought with my credit card. My mother was always Ethan's shield. If I suggested he look for a serious job, she would press a hand to her chest and say I was too harsh, that not all of us had his sensitivity. Slowly, I became a stranger in my own family. I visited on Sundays out of obligation, clinging to that blood bond we believe is unbreakable. I would sit there listening to Ethan complain about how expensive life had become, while my mother nodded, ignoring that the money funding that life came from my hands. That dynamic lasted for years. I was the silent pillar, The man who never complained. The one always there to fix the financial crises Ethan created with his irresponsibility. My company grew, my responsibilities increased, and so did my loneliness. I never married. I never had children. They were my family, or at least that's what I wanted to believe. I had created a dangerous balance where my worth was measured solely by my ability to solve other people's problems. That's the danger of being the strong one in the family. Everyone forgets that you feel too, that you get tired, and most of all, that you are not a money machine. That balance shattered on the night of Ethan's 38th birthday. They threw a grand party, of course, funded by my budget. It was there that the masks finally fell, and reality hit me with a coldness that left me breathless. The party was a display of unnecessary opulence. There were more than 50 people in the backyard of the house I maintained. String lights, a premium catering service, expensive liquor, all charged to my account. I was there, standing in a corner with a glass of water in my hand, watching Ethan move through the crowd as if he were an industry tycoon. He was wearing a suit that cost more than any of my employees' monthly salaries, an early birthday gift my mother had insisted I buy for him. I approached a group where Ethan's friends and a few distant cousins were gathered. My mother stood in the center, smiling with that triumphant expression she only wore when she was near her youngest son. They didn't see me walk up, or if they did, they didn't care. Ethan was finishing a story about how he would have run my company far more efficiently if he had been given the initial capital I was lucky enough to inherit, which was an absolute lie. I started with an old pickup truck and debt. "Daniel is a man from another era," Ethan said, letting out a laugh as he poured himself more whiskey. "He's got that worker ant mentality, just work and work with no real vision. Honestly, he's a failure with money. If it weren't for the structure holding him up, he wouldn't know what to do with his life. He's boring, has no class, and let's be honest, if he weren't my brother, he wouldn't even be invited to events like this." The silence that followed his words was uncomfortable for some, but not for everyone. My mother, my own mother, let out a loud, clear laugh. She wiped a tear from the corner of her eye and added, "Oh, Ethan, you're terrible. But you're right. Your brother was always the slow one in the family. He's a good man, but he doesn't have that spark you do. He's only good with numbers, sitting behind a desk. Thank God he has you to bring some life to this last name." I froze. What I felt wasn't volcanic anger. It was a dry, icy coldness running down my spine. My hands didn't shake. My eyes didn't water. I simply observed Ethan's gestures, the way he adjusted his jacket, the way he looked around for approval, the way he dismissed my existence while drinking the alcohol I had paid for. My mother looked at him with pride, as if he had just spoken some universal truth. That's when Ethan saw me. He didn't backtrack. If anything, he puffed out his chest. "Right, Daniel? Don't take it the wrong way, brother, but someone has to tell you how it is. You've been lucky. But as a man, as someone with vision, you've got a long way to go. You're a failure who stumbled into a business that basically runs itself." I looked him straight in the eyes. I didn't say a single word. I turned around and walked toward the exit. My mother shouted from across the yard not to be so sensitive, that it was just a joke. But it wasn't a joke. It was confirmation that I wasn't a son or a brother to them. I was an ATM they could spit on. When I got home, the silence greeted me like a refuge. I sat in my office without turning on the lights. The public humiliation wasn't what hurt the most. It was the betrayal of loyalty. For decades, I had been the wall that kept reality from hitting them. I had protected Ethan from his own failures and given my mother a queen's retirement. And their response, in front of everyone, was to call me a failure and laugh at my lack of spark. I felt a deep emptiness, a symbolic eviction from what I once believed was my home. I no longer had a family. I had parasites feeding on my blood while mocking its taste. In that office, With nothing but moonlight coming through the window, I made a decision. The party was over. The failure was about to show them what really happens when the engine stops and the structure they mocked disappears.
An hour later, my mother sent me a text message.
"Ethan needs you to transfer money for the waiter's tip. We ran out of cash." I didn't respond. I blocked the phone and placed it face down on my desk. That was the last time they received anything from me without a legal document involved. The disconnection was total. In my mind, they no longer existed as loved ones. They were simply debtors. The next morning, I didn't wake up angry. I woke up with mathematical clarity. The slow one in the family was about to start moving with a precision they wouldn't even be able to process. I called my attorney, a man named Richard Collins, who has worked with me since I bought my first truck. He's a dry, efficient type, speaks only when necessary. We met in his office before sunrise. I placed the property titles, service contracts, and the statements from the additional credit cards they were using on his desk.
I told him I wanted to revoke everything.
Not impulsively, but through proper legal channels, so there would be no way back. My mother lived in that house under a life use agreement I had drafted myself, but there were behavioral and maintenance clauses that had never been respected. Ethan, meanwhile, had a fictional consulting contract in my company, so he could receive health insurance and retirement contributions. The first thing I did was sign his termination for job abandonment. Collins looked at me over his glasses. He asked if I was sure, if I didn't want to give them a chance to apologize. I told him apologies don't pay for disrespect, and I no longer had a family to protect. My plan wasn't to throw them out overnight. That would have been emotional. My plan was to remove the scaffolding holding up their cardboard lives and let gravity handle the rest.
For the next 3 weeks,
I acted as if nothing had happened. When my mother called complaining that her credit card had been declined at the beauty salon, I calmly told her it must be a system error and that I would look into it tomorrow. That tomorrow never came. Ethan sent several emails demanding his consulting payment, claiming he had debts piling up because of his lifestyle. I didn't respond to a single one. I let the anxiety of uncertainty begin to eat away at his arrogance.
I started dismantling the luxuries. I cancelled the landscaping service, the house cleaning staff, and the pool maintenance contract. When the property began to look neglected, my mother panicked. She sent me pictures of dry leaves and cloudy water, saying it was embarrassing in front of the neighbors. I replied with short sentences. "Times are tight, Mom. We have to prioritize." She didn't understand. To her, money simply appeared in her account like magic. She never stopped to think that the slow one she laughed at was the one performing the magic. Meanwhile, I focused on shielding my assets.
I moved my capital into funds where they would have no legal trail. I knew that once the final blow landed, they would try to sue me for financial support. I was ready. I met with a financial advisor to liquidate the property where they lived. Since I was the sole owner and the maintenance bills, now unpaid, were under my name, I placed the house on the private market. An investment group purchased it in record time. It was a cold preparation. Every night I reviewed my lists. Every step was calculated so that when they finally realized the magnitude of the disaster, they would have nothing to hold on to. Ethan, in his infinite stupidity, even tried to apply for a bank loan using my name as a reference. The bank called me, and with a smile no one could see, I told them the truth. That man does not work for me, has no income, and I do not recommend him as a credit risk. I closed his last escape route without him even knowing it. I enjoyed those quiet days. I sat in my office reviewing company reports, watching my profits rise now that I wasn't diverting thousands of dollars each month to support 2 parasites. People say revenge is a dish best served cold. I believe it's a dish served with patience. I was waiting for the exact moment when reality would hit them in the face like a freight truck. And that moment was about to arrive with the eviction notice. The day of the climax came without shouting, at least not from me. It was a Tuesday morning. The new owners of the property, an investment group that doesn't accept excuses, arrived with a court order to take possession. I was standing on the sidewalk, watching as two moving trucks parked in front of the house I had paid for over the years.
My mother stepped out onto the porch, wrapped in a silk robe, her face pale and distorted.
Ethan stood behind her, still half asleep but already wearing that familiar expression of outrage he used whenever something didn't go his way. When they saw me, they thought I had come to rescue them. "Daniel, thank God you're here," my mother shouted, pointing at the men unloading equipment. "Tell these people this is a mistake. Tell them who we are." I walked toward them slowly, hands in my pockets. There was no hatred in my eyes, only an indifference that seemed to frighten them more than any insult ever could. "There's no mistake," I said, my voice so steady that even the movers paused to listen. "The house has been sold. The utilities have been shut off. You have exactly 2 hours to remove your personal belongings before private security secures the property." Ethan stepped forward, trying to intimidate me with a height that was only good for modeling clothes he never paid for.
"What the hell are you talking about? You can't sell our mother's house. That's illegal. I'll sue you. I'll take every last dollar from that pathetic company of yours." I laughed. It was short, dry, almost mechanical. I pulled an envelope from my jacket and handed it to him. Inside were copies of the contracts, his official termination letter, and the record of every debt he had accumulated under my name. Debts I had already settled while permanently closing his lines of credit. "There's your vision, Ethan," I said, locking eyes with him. "There's the result of my worker ant mentality. Since I'm such a failure, I've decided I no longer have the intellectual capacity to fund your lifestyle. As of today, you're the family's man with spark. Show the world how to live without this boring man's money." My mother began to cry, dramatic tears searching for the sympathy she had summoned from me 1,000 times before. "Daniel, I'm your mother. How can you do this to us? Where are we supposed to go?"
"Wherever Ethan's talent takes you," I replied without blinking. "You had years to respect me. You chose to treat me like a means to an end. Well, the means is exhausted. The house is no longer mine, and you are no longer my responsibility." Watching Ethan collapse was almost artistic. His arrogance turned into childish panic within seconds. He started begging, saying he was sorry, that the party was a mistake, that the alcohol made him talk too much. But I wasn't hearing words. I was hearing justice. The new owners entered the house and began tagging the furniture. Since I had purchased it, I had included it in the sale. My mother and brother could take only their clothes and personal belongings.
I stayed there until I saw their suitcases lined up on the curb.
Ethan tried making phone calls, but his phone, which was under my corporate plan, had already been disconnected. My mother sat on one of the suitcases, staring into nothingness, finally realizing that the laugh she let out at that party had cost her the roof over her head. I didn't feel pity. I felt relief, like I had removed a backpack full of stones I had carried for half my life. Before I got into my car, Ethan grabbed my arm. His hand was shaking. "You can't leave us like this, Daniel. We have nothing." I removed his hand with a firm gesture. "You're right, Ethan. You have nothing, but you've got plenty of spark, don't you? Use it. I'm going to be a failure somewhere else, with my money and my peace."
I started the engine and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror.
I knew they would end up in a cheap motel with the little cash they had left, and within a week they'd be looking for someone else to drain. But with me, they were finished. The engine had shut down for good. It has been 6 months since I left my mother and Ethan standing on that curb. I haven't heard from them directly, although rumors have reached me through a few cousins. They say Ethan tried getting a sales job and lasted 3 days. Apparently his vision wasn't enough to convince anyone to buy anything from him. My mother now lives in a small rented apartment, paid for with what little she had left from a piece of jewelry she managed to keep. I've received messages from unknown numbers asking for forgiveness, talking about regret and the importance of family. I haven't responded to a single one. Forgiveness is for those who made a mistake, not for those who revealed their true nature. What I learned through this process is that people don't change when you give them everything. They just become more skilled at hiding their contempt. My mistake wasn't being generous. It was believing gratitude was an automatic response to sacrifice. It isn't. Some people see your kindness as weakness and your silence as permission to walk all over you. In my solitude, I found a peace I didn't know existed. There are no more bills to pay for people who insult me behind my back, no more uncomfortable dinners where I'm the punchline for a parasite in an expensive suit. My company continues to grow, but now my time belongs to me. I've started traveling, eating in quiet restaurants, enjoying the fruits of my labor without the guilt they tried to inject into me. Many will say I was cruel, that a son should never abandon his mother, or that a brother must always protect his sibling. I say a man also has a duty to respect himself. I'm not the villain of this story. I'm simply the man who decided he would no longer finance his own humiliation. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's watching life collect its debts. It's allowing the mediocre to face the world without the shield you once provided. The fall is hard, but it's the only way some people learn the true weight of a meal placed on the table. My conscience is clear. I sleep better than ever. If this story felt as intense to you as it was for me to live it, leave a like and tell me in the comments what you would have done. And if you're not subscribed yet, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories.